What's up guys, it's UCEC Specialist, and after a few years of open fields and dusty deserts, I think it's time for Battlefield to leave these natural environments behind.
With no country left to fight for.
The US and Russia are both being accused of fielding armed no-pats in an escalating fight over vital resources.
So I've been playing Battlefield a while. I joined the franchise back in Battlefield 3 like many others and have played every title to date. However, over the years, as many things have changed, the one thing that's caught my eye more than anything else is DICE leaning into what I like to call natural map design. Let me show you what I mean. Back in Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, maps used to look like this. However, now since Battlefield 1, multiplayer environments have looked more like this.
Hold back here.
One right on the backside of that.
Make sure you guys' launchers are loaded. They swing around back to the Jeep last minute.
Hostile reinforcements in your area. Occupying forces.
Cancel that.
Here we go. Extraction
Oh, they just got a Doge.
Capsule drop in. Data drives aboard.
Now, while there are, of course, exceptions to this rule, I believe Battlefield has lost a huge part of what made its gameplay special when it started opting for natural environments instead of the urban environments that were the hallmark of the game's golden years. Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 are often regarded as the two best games in franchise history with their gritty tone, intense multiplayer, and larger-than-life heroics. And I believe a huge factor in that reputation was the philosophy the devs had about multiplayer environments. Operation Metro wasn't just a traditional 3-lane map design, it was the train under Paris, a key location in the narrative. Siege of Shanghai wasn't just another urban environment, it provided perhaps the greatest wow factor in franchise history. And maps like Noshar Canal, Cien Crossing, Xiba Tower, Zavad, and even Karkand are still legendary to this day. These urban maps often played better than their contemporary counterparts, with better battle lines, clear objective placement, clear vehicle and infantry separation, and helped drive home a feeling of relatability to the player. These were spaces that were recognizable and provided better gameplay balance than what we see today, while still being big enough for 64 players. A great example of these old maps often being better is that air vehicles had become a big problem in Battlefield 2042. Often being overpowered, the devs are left in a tough spot, either nerf them into the ground, ruining their power fantasy, or allow one or two good pilots to control the outcome of a game with dozens of other players. Now, to their credit, the devs have done a good job of tiptoeing the line. However, perhaps a better way to balance infantry and air is to create environments that allow each group opportunities to attack and defend on their own terms. I remember Cien Crossing back in Battlefield 3 would always grant the player a difficult option. Either stay inside and fight tooth and nail over tight interiors, or move quickly through the road hoping the tank wouldn't catch you. Siege of Shanghai was often the same. Playing cat and mouse with the attack chopper was a game of intelligent movement and map knowledge. And with that map in particular, you had so many great, thought-out opportunities at your disposal. The bridges had a covered pedestrian crossing that shielded you from the sky, players could dive underwater and swim undetected, and making a desperate run into one of the many buildings gave an attentive pilot an opportunity to turn the tables. Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, and even Battlefield Hardline provided the player so many more unique opportunities and more personal agency. In Battlefield 2042, you're often left at the mercy of greater powers. Running across Hourglass and get seen by a tank? Well, there's nothing you can do. Parachuting into Breakaway and get seen by a helicopter? Well, you're gonna die. Battlefield 2042 continues a philosophy of open, untethered maps that began in Battlefield 1 and I believe the dev team creates for two reasons. Number 1, resources. The fact of the matter, when creating a map at the size needed to support 128 or even just 64 players, the devs now lean on the idea of bigger is better, opting for dramatic, bombastic visuals and open play spaces where the devs can leave large areas with limited assets and get the most bang for their buck in terms of size versus asset count. As an art director and someone who's dabbled in 3D modeling, I'd take a bet and say creating a large field is a lot quicker than hard surface modeling a set of unique buildings and all their interiors. And with the reworks of maps like Renewal and Breakaway, we've seen the map scale down in order to reallocate assets into more dense areas per the fans' request. So between development time, engine resources, and designing a map for 128 players, open, natural environments are the clear winner on paper. The second reason I believe the dev team is sticking with natural environments is they worked shockingly well in Battlefield 1, a game that didn't have helicopters, didn't have advanced movement, nor 128 players. So now the dev team believes that they'll work in every project. EA and DICE want to create things that are bigger and better, and maps like St. Quentin's Scar and Battlefield 1 were shockingly good. However, that game was built around the idea of open maps with slower movement, bullet spread, and clunkier, more tactile gameplay mechanics. Simply put, Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 2042 are totally different games, yet the dev team is creating maps that share a lot of attributes because EA wants something that's marketable and bigger than ever before. For the time being, I believe we're stuck where we are. Battlefield 2042 has to uphold its promise of 128 player support, and the dev team doesn't really seem that interested in creating anything more urban or gritty. In fact, the seasonal content appears to be pushing further and further into natural environments in remote Canada and Sweden, rather than content that would have been familiar or significant to the average player, like a map of a major metropolitan area, although Season 5 is rumored to have a more infantry-focused map. Season 2's map Stranded is a great example of a map that worked as an FPS arena, but even when working well as an environment to fight in, just seems a little outlandish as a narrative thread when compared to Battlefield maps of old. While I quite like the narrative concept of Battlefield 2042, casual players, the sort of people picking up the game via Game Pass, will have no understanding of Stranded's backstory or location, and will most likely see many of the maps as just random natural environments, while to the contrary, featuring some more significant landmarks could make the narrative way more compelling. Think about how compelling the original Modern Warfare 2 was with the fall of Washington DC, and Battlefield 3's Operation Metro where you saw the Eiffel Tower in the distance. Now, this isn't to say Battlefield's turn into natural map design is all negative. A lot of the maps are great visual set pieces that look amazing in trailers. They can feel over the top and really shine when appreciated in that perspective. Maps like Stranded, Spearhead, and Orbital may be some of the best looking maps in franchise history with thick vegetation, good color theory, and dramatic locations. When firing on all cylinders, you can tell what the devs are going for, but in terms of Hourglass, Breakaway, or even maps like Hamada or Twisted Steel from Battlefield 5, this large natural environment philosophy isn't working, especially now that we're back in the modern era. But when DICE decides to do something else, they can still make great work. Battlefield 5's final map, Al Marj Encampment, was one of my favorite maps in years. Rotterdam, Devastation, and Amiens were genuinely good maps. However, those were the last urban maps with traditional lanes that Battlefield has featured. Battlefield 2042's reboot of Renewal is probably one of the best maps now, with its more clear structure, well-divided areas, and parallel lanes, but still has many of the trappings plaguing the rest of the game like vehicle balance. And the same thing goes for Manifest, which has gotten a facelift in the latest update, and plays really well as an infantry-focused map, which you can check out my full review of right here. For the sake of balance, narrative, and engine limitations, Battlefield needs to return to denser, smaller urban maps and leave natural environments behind moving forward. Looking at the pacing, structure, and lane control from games past and combining that with the art direction and unique styling of Battlefield 2042's map selection could be a combination for success. The developers need to structure their maps more firmly and understand the difference between cover and structure. Battlefield 2042's map Spearhead has cover in the form of rocks throughout an empty field, and while that may help me avoid gunfire, there's nowhere near the level of map design when compared to maps like Amiens or Karkand. A map like Grand Bazaar had clear lines of sight and areas of attention, where players were more often killed due to their attempt to push forward instead of their lack of situational information like is so common on these natural maps. All things considered, I really think Battlefield's evolution of map design and their philosophy behind it is the biggest issue facing the franchise today. Specialists are getting a soft rework, content is limited but coming, and Marcus Leto has confirmed the Frostbite engine is getting some more upgrades. These are all bad situations that are improving, but after the inclusion of Spearhead with Season 3, it's clear DICE is happy to keep their focus on natural environments. Start with a singular point of focus or concept, add plenty of reused assets like crates and sandbags, and then fill the rest of the budget with open fields. No initial thought of lane design, no clear attachments between points of interest, just a collection of interesting separated areas with no direction for the player in between, a philosophy we've seen since Battlefield 1 and something the team only appears to be leaning more heavily into update after update. A lot of the game's issues could be solved if maps were designed with some level of engaging characteristics, yet the developers only give themselves an open field for the majority of the play area. The map doesn't work as an item in the sandbox, it becomes something they need to balance against. A good map features its own attributes that make it a character within the sandbox, where a rock, paper, scissors balance can play out differently based on the attributes of each map, instead of always having to balance the game based on fighting in an open field where vehicles reign supreme and infantry suffers information overload without a clear structure. But guys, drop your comments below and tell me what map you'd like to see remastered in Battlefield 2042. The Manifest rework was pretty good in my opinion, and it sounds like we're getting an infantry-focused map that was inspired by Battlefield 4 for Season 5. So for everything else Battlefield, stay tuned and subscribe, and as always, thank you guys for watching.